Anyway, this is a conversation which is essentially a conversation about preaching to the choir, because I invited quite a few of my friends who've got, who are sort of
not converted.
Absolutely in love with Modi and, very much in the RSS. I've got friends in that circle. You've got to keep friends in all circles, but be yourself. And none of them said they're coming. So we are essentially preaching to the choir, but let's have a conversation and feel good about ourselves in these dark times. Rakesh, the first question that I want to ask you is, what drove you? We'll first talk about the documentary, but really I'm going to speak, we've agreed that we're going to speak very little on the documentary because it's all out in the public domain. But we essentially want to focus more on the present and the future, because the past is the past. The first question, Rakesh, I want to ask you is, what drove you to do this? What still drives you to do this? And how do you maintain a balance in your documentary? Because essentially what one gets from the documentary is the very visceral aspect of what happened in Gujarat, but also where you are not didactic or you are not passing judgment, you are not judge, jury, executioner. You are frankly just laying it out there and letting people make their own judgment. So it's quite unfair when people say, oh, this is a classic left conspiracy or anti-BJP conspiracy or whatever. You're fundamentally laying out the facts. I mean, you've got the lady from Abhinav Bharat, you've got her on camera, you've got her to say what she has to say. You've not provoked her, you've not put in your viewpoints. So what drives you, or what drove you then, what drives you now?
Well, I'll take the last sort of aspect of it first. When the carnage happened, obviously I saw it as a cataclysmic event, a turning point in Indian political history. And I'd been looking at riots, ever since my college days, so the 1980s. I was a student at Delhi University when 1984 happened, and I'd seen and heard of Bhagalpur, I'd seen Meerut and other riots in UP and so on. But this seemed radically different. So I was very sure when 92, 93 riots happened in Bombay, first in December 92 and then in January 93. At that point, I decided that I didn't want to do anything as a filmmaker, that it was happening in my backyard in my city, and I was in Andheri East, and the flashpoint was in Jogeshwari, which was about a kilometer away. So I actually gave up filmmaking for a year and ran a relief camp in Jogeshwari East for the affected families. And we did all kinds of things, including filing of FIRs, collecting relief materials, forming Mohalla committees, holding peace meetings, and we ended with a campaign, Shramdan campaign, where I got the Muslim homes reconstructed by the Hindu side and the Hindu homes reconstructed by the Muslim side. So both of them came together during that process. But when 2002 happened, I was very clear that I did not want to participate in any relief effort, whether it was for long-term justice and filing of FIRs and cases and so on, or the immediate Red Cross type relief. I felt that my best contribution would be that as a filmmaker. Having decided that, I just couldn't get myself to shoot. I went for a trip a few weeks after the carnage. I took some shots, maybe shot for a day or two, and came back. Because the scale was too overwhelming, what had happened with state complicity was just too much to handle and deal with. It took me almost 6 months to clarify things in my own head. The questions that I asked myself were, why do I want to make this film? Who am I making it for? And what do I hope to achieve? And the answers were slow to clarify themselves in my head because I was dealing with many confusions. But I got clarity that I did not want to make a film for people like us. There was no point in preaching to the choir. that I wanted to talk to the, and there was no point in also trying to talk to the hardcore radical. Somebody who's driven by faith was not going to listen to reason or respond to reason. But it was my hope and hypothesis that there was a vast 90% in between or 80% in between that was not either hardcore left or hardcore right. And that is the audience I needed to address. And that in turn clarified everything else for me in terms of what I was going to shoot, how I was going to shoot, my tone and tenor and everything. So there are, and since then, this has marked my filming, for the next 15 years or so in Gujarat. You never hear me use words like communal, fascist, and any of the jargon that doesn't mean anything much anymore. You never see an activist with a bookshelf background, which is a classical staple of these kind of documentaries. You never hear any expert or any commentator, any journalist, because I did not want any second-hand sources. You either have eyewitnesses or victims or perpetrators or their leaders. So this is all primary material. I deliberately chose not to have a voiceover in the film because I felt those become sort of points of contention, and people start looking at meanings behind words and start imputing all kinds of dimensions to that which don't exist. So once all this was clarified, then I was also very clear about the fact that this was not going to be just about the victims or just about the horrors that had been perpetrated, but I also wished to understand why did the people who did it do it? Why did the leadership that drove them to do it, what were their reasons? And what was the sort of overall political impact of this? So which is why I shot with a span of 1.5 years for Final Solution, covering till 6 months after the elections. And then I went back because there were many dimensions in the immediate aftermath that I couldn't have probed. For instance, Hindutva and caste angle that I refer to in the sequence where this woman is walking with me. So from Dalit part, I go to the Muslim part, and then both of them talk to me about it.
You think that in in riots, whether orchestrated or spontaneous, I don't know. I'm not any kind of social scientist. I'm just your friend. So, and that's from where I get my social science, and then Vicky and a couple of people that I speak to. But riots, whether provoked, that's orchestrated, or spontaneous, I think we must agree that many riots can happen spontaneously as well. There are, it's not necessary that every time there's a leader who comes and lights a fire. There are things that happen spontaneously. But do you think that the end victim is always the economically, socially backward?
The underclass.
So that is a kind of a given, whether we name it a Dalit, we name it a Muslim, we name it whatever. But the victim is almost always the underclass, yes, in your experience?
Yes, that's true. Where I have issues with you is, yes, communal skirmishes or minor riots can be very spontaneous. But for anything to sustain itself beyond a day, and this is not something that I'm talking about. People like Vibhuti Rai, police officer who wrote about riots, other senior IPS officers I've spoken to during the years about riot management, riot control. They're all very clear about the fact that if left to us, any riot can be quelled within 24 hours. If it proceeds beyond 24 hours, always assume there's political pressure, always assume somebody's orchestrating it, somebody's pulling the strings, and we are under orders not to control the violence and let the perpetrators go.
How much does, whenever you have, whether it's the Muslim side, whether it's the Hindu side, let's take basically these two sides, the Muslim side and the Hindu side, because that's where most riots, at least historically, have been happening. How much is the fear factor? Like, for instance, if you see that lady from the Abhinav Bindra, I don't know who she is.
Abhinav Bharat.
Abhinav Bharat, but who is she?
Himani Savarkar, double-barrel Hindutva, Godse's niece and Savarkar's daughter-in-law.
So, That's the same one where Abhinav Bindra was.
Abhinav
not-
Bharat,
not-
yeah.
No, Abhinav, the Bindra guy was. That was not Bindra. What was his name? He was involved in the Maligaon blast.
Colonel Purohit.
Purohit.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever, allegedly involved.
Colonel Purohit, Dayanand Pandey, Sadhvi Pragya.
So what I want to know is, when I speak to a lot of my Hindu friends, perhaps from
Of which I'm one.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, but you're one. You're kind of.
Yeah.
I think we belong to this endangered species of liberalism which is dying in India. So I wouldn't really classify it. But otherwise, a kind of a God-fearing Hindu. If I speak to him, and I say, what drives you? What drives you to support Modi? What drives you to support Hindutva? What drives you to, that this is inherently from within, that this is something wrong. And invariably I get an answer, fear. The fear that the Hindu is going to be, whether it's logical or not, whether we can prove it with facts or figures, as an emotional response, it's fear in the Hindu that they are going to be overwhelmed in this country, that the Muslims are, you have the examples of partition, you have Bangladesh, you have the bomb blasts, you have all that kind of thing that used to happen all along. So one is the fear factor in the Hindu, and in the Muslim community, the genuine fear that all these riots, end victims, maximum number of casualties is us, and we are always at the wrong end of the stick. Now the Muslims are caught up in that wedge between their hardcore Maulavis and Imams and who give them their fatwas, and the political class which just uses them as vote blocks. So how much does fear within both the sides, forget the orchestration, how much does fear play a role in actually getting these people out in the streets to fight?
Oscar, that is a very starting point, fear of the other. The identity constructs that are constantly being stereotyped to intensify that fear of the other. If you look at preachers on either side, whether it is the VHP kind of firebrand preachers or the hardcore Maulanas and Maulvis, and I've met people from the entire spectrum, they always invoke fear of the other. Now that fear of the other takes various shapes and forms, and both sides of the right wing, the Muslim right wing and the Hindu right wing, have actually perfected this art because they are able to appeal to a cross section, to somebody. It would be as visceral as ye tumhare, these guys are going to destroy your temples and actually convert you, Gazwai kind of nonsense. To somebody as more middle class, it's always about the stereotype of the overbreeding Muslim, that they have 5 children, look at you, you guys are progressive, you produce only 1 or 2 kids. So at some point, India is going to become a Muslim Rashtra. Now, even if you did the maths, as an aside, between the differential rate of growth of Hindu population versus Muslim population, maybe that could happen over 400 years. But then also birth rates have been declining within the Muslims.
Rakesh, you're not getting I'm not interested in the math. I get the math.
I'm saying that the fear is the starting point.
So what I want to know is, if the fear is the starting point, what is the political class from both sides? Whether it's the left, which sort of sometimes overlooks various forms of Islamic fundamentalism that takes place in, let's say, in West Bengal and Kerala, and it's very true. And from the right, and not that from the right you don't have sensible people, you have sensible people in the right. Why is it that they are incapable of, confronting this fear factor from both the communities and trying to bridge? Does it not serve them politically? Is that the reason?
Yeah, of course, it doesn't serve them politically in any way whatsoever, because, fear produces vote banks. Harmony doesn't produce a vote bank of any kind. If you look at Indian politics since the late 1980s, the failure of the secularist movement, so to say, has been its inability to produce any kind of symbols, any kind of coherent slogans, any kind of ideological bulwark against identity constructs of this kind.
So that means the allegedly secular forces or the liberal forces have failed to produce this kind of,
A
whether
counter.
it's a constitution, a counter in terms of symbolism, because people look for simple, people are not looking at complicated explanations. People look for simple symbols. So is it that we have failed to use, as you say, images or constructs of, let's say, the constitution, or let's say of liberal values, or of secular ideals in the true sense? Now, when you say secular ideals, you can't, bash the Hindutva movement and then overlook the Islamic fundamentalism simply because Islamic fundamentalism suits your political purpose. Yes. So do you think that over a period of time we have been, bereft of this particular constructing this symbolism, and we've just been playing, Samajwadi Party, how many seats are they going to get, BSP, how many, Congress, how many, left, how many, can we form the government or not? So have people seen through that, and has the right wing, on the contrary, over a period of time, 100 years, have they been able to now project a strong motive for themselves in the form of Hindutva, and now, of course, in the persona of Modi or Yogi or whatever? And so therefore that's very, very difficult for us to counter, simply because we don't have symbols on our side which appeal to our liberal values.
Look, Oscar, undeniably, I think the secular movement failed to provide coherent answers that could catch popular imagination. But over a period of time, and I'm actually digressing a bit, I've actually begun to wonder, whether the system of democracy that was imposed on Indian society in 1947, whether we were at all ready for it, whether we at all did value it, how and why it collapsed so swiftly in the last couple of decades is, perhaps for posterity to analyze in great detail. But all the tendencies, the political tendencies we see today are not new. If we start looking at the Congress, we can't look at the Congress as a secular formation. Right from its inception, the Congress had various strands. It had a very pronounced Hindutva strand, exemplified by people like Patel, people like Rajendra Prasad, Govind Vallabh Pant, who opposed the Hindu Code Bill, who opposed Ambedkar, and so on. So there was that very strong Hindutva lobby. Tilak, let's not forget Tilak, and his sort of lasting gift to us, the Ganpati festival, where, today if we talk about the fact that there are processions, Hindutva processions, that go in front of masjids and start dancing, that actually started with Tilak. The Ganpati processions actually would stop way back, over 100 years ago, outside masjids, and create ruckus then. So there was a Hindutva lobby. There was a leftist strand in politics,
exemplified by
Nehru, Bose, and whatever. Then Congress had technocrats over the years. So whether it was Mahalanobis or people like Montek Singh Ahluwalia or Manmohan Singh and so on. And the fourth largest bloc is the opportunists. And these opportunists have migrated from the Congress wherever they've been out of power for more than 2 or 3 terms. So all the kinds of exodus that you see, it's the opportunist gang which had its share of the power, shared in the spoils of the power. And once they could not, then they've gone to the formation that can actually deliver that to them. So in terms of fault lines, political fault lines or social fault lines, communal fault lines, nothing is new. We went through, I'm not too sure about this. My hypothesis at the moment is that we went through an unusual period of 40 or 50 years, and in which there were attempts to paper over these fault lines. So, we used to have campaigns like Mile Sur Mera Tumhara to say that...
But there was democracy. See, for all practical purposes, I don't think that we can run our democracy.
There was a version of democracy.
Yes, because, I love that quote of Ramchandra Guha when he says that the most important election for India was in 1952, not the one in 1948, was it? I don't know.
No, 52 was first election.
52 or 48 was one? No.
52 was the first election.
Or what is the second one? 58?
57. Yeah.
So he always says the 57 election was the most important election for us, the second election.
Yeah.
Because all along in Latin America and Africa, etc., which got independence at the same time, The first election was the general election. And then the second election in Africa and Latin Asia was the election of the general. Whereas we had another general election in 57. So I don't think we can really, sort of whitewash our democracy, whatever, just dismiss our democracy.
As I said, we've had a version
I
of
still
democracy.
think that we had, at least maybe in our youth, we definitely had democracy in many ways. We could express ourselves, we could do that. To a great extent, would you agree that that democracy that pervaded us came to us naturally because this was essentially very much in India a Hindu society? And I use the word Hindu advisedly here. Because what I mean to say, when I say Hindu, I'm not talking about the caste, I'm not talking of the rest of the baggage, but people accepted this democracy because Hinduism, not the present day Hindu problem, Hinduism per se is or always was a religion with its faults, but a religion essentially of debate and dissent, and you could change, you could be anything, and yet you could be a Hindu kind of thing. It was not one kind of a didactic religion like one of the Abrahamic faiths. So do you think that democracy was ingrained in our people to a certain extent for it to be able to adapt for so many years? Of course, now we've gone downhill, but that's another story which we should deal with. Would you agree with that hypothesis, or do you think it's wrong?
Well, I mean, no, I won't be dismissive of that hypothesis. It is absolutely correct to say that Hinduism was never monotheistic. And part of my problem with what has happened since the 80s is that the VHP, BJP, Bajrangal, RSS have monotheized Hindutva, monotheized Hinduism. I mean, their first slogan, and I've had the chance to actually talk to Advani at length about this, जो हमारे राम का नहीं है वो हमारे काम का नहीं है. And I said, why? Because we have Shaivites, we have people who believe in Vishnu, we have people who believe in Charvak, materialism and so on. Even atheists are, identify themselves as Hindus and so on. So he said, this is exactly the point. All the Hindus have to be united. His exact words to me were, Hindu समाज को जागृत करना है और एक करना है. Which is what they've ended up doing. I mean, they've actually ended up monotheizing Hindu religion. And I mean, the prime example now is the entire circus that happened around the Ram Temple inauguration, last month or whatever, 6 weeks ago. To come back to the larger point that I was trying to make about fault lines and so on, in the 90s, when all this was happening, caste was the destroyer of Hindutva. So identity politics saw two kinds of constructs. One was around religious identity, Hindu, Muslim and so on, and the other was around caste, famously Mandal versus Kamandal. So in UP, again an election that I was filming for BBC in 1991, and I covered it extensively, that was a state in which BJP came into power for the first time, even before Gujarat. And when they came into power, I remember talking to the RSS Prabhari for UP, and I asked him, "Ab to aap Ram Mandir banai doge?" So he said, "No way. This Ram Mandir is our Ramban. This is our, secret weapon for the ages. This, you will see, is now going to transform politics over the next 30 years or 40 years."
Which it did.
Which it did. I mean, but at that point I laughed him off, but it did. However, by 96 in UP, thanks to Mulayam and thanks to Mayawati, the Dalits and OBCs went out of the Hindutva fold and started voting along those lines. What has happened in the last 10 or 15 years is that BJP, RSS have done enough ground level work to woo Dalits and OBCs back to themselves. Mayawati controls the Jatav Dalits. But in the non-Jatav Dalits, and I did look at the numbers for the last UP election in 2022, almost 48% of non-Jatav Dalits voted for the BJP directly. Even among the Jatavs, almost 20% voted for BJP. Among the OBCs, the non-Yadav OBCs, 57% voted for the BJP.
So you would think that Modi as an OBC leader has been able to
Nobody
consolidate...
sees him as an OBC leader.
Whatever, but
yeah.
he's been able to consolidate this Hindu vote.
Not at all. We credit Modi with too many things. This is all social engineering done by the RSS and run by Amit Shah politically. It was Amit Shah who was handling UP in the period between 2012 and 14. Modi had nothing to do, and Modi didn't even get any traction in UP during those years. They did various kinds of things. I'll give you I'll give you one example. The Rajbhar community, which they wooed away from the OBC fold. Now the Rajbhars were told that you are actually not OBC, you are actually Rajputs because your ancestors took on the Mughals, and they resurrected a figure called Raja Soheldev. So right from 2011-12, at district level, in 8 or 9 districts, they started having Raja Soheldev memorial debates, inter-college competition, athletic meets, singing competitions for girls, and so on. Then they started holding political events where they started talking about the fact that the Congress, Samajwadi Party, Mayawati government hadn't given Soheldev his due, and if they came into power, they would do X, Y, Z for Soheldev, include him in the textbooks and so on and so forth. So by the time, come 2014, they actually had wooed the Rajbhar community away. Now, the Rajbhar community was strong only in about 6 or 7 Lok Sabha seats, where they had over 50,000 voters. But in another 10-15 seats, they had 20,000, 25,000 voters. So this kind of micro-social engineering that the RSS and Amit Shah-led team did, they were able to woo away 6, 7, 8 communities like that, each with 15,000, 20,000 votes. And 160,000 votes in any political constituency make the difference.
So the counter argument that very often that is given to this is that secular parties or the, today the Congress, the Samajwadi and Mamta and whatever, so they also play caste politics. They also were looking at, for instance, Samajwadi Party was famous for the Yadav-MY combination. Lalu was famous for doing the caste politics. So what is, what is it sort of that makes the BJP different for playing these caste politics under the umbrella or getting people under the umbrella of Hindutva? And why is it kosher for the so-called secular parties to play their caste politics? To the extent that even now, Rahul Gandhi, in today's age, my argument is basically this, is countering Hindutva as a kind of a, quasi-fascist force. Is that going to be countered by liberal democratic principles, which takes on everything even which comes under your vote bank, whether it is, fanatic Muslims, whether it is caste politics? Are you going to confront your vote bank with your liberal ideas? Or are you going to suppress that for your vote bank and then confront your liberal thoughts only on the Hindutva brigade? So my point is it okay for Mulayam and Mamta and whatever, within the secular gang as it were, to play caste politics, and is it not okay for the BJP to play?
The short answer is no.
But so how do we sort of, how does the secular brigade, as it were, and today whatever, the India Alliance.
Oscar, that is the tragedy of Indian politics. There is nothing called the secular brigade.
Correct. So they have been unable to ratchet the game up beyond their identity politics.
There hasn't been a secular formation. That's the point I made when I was talking about the Congress, that the Congress has been these 4 streams, and these 4 streams continue to coexist within the Congress. Now the Congress...
But the 4 streams could coexist.
No, they cannot. Ideologically, they cannot. If you start looking at the fact that the Congress...
They did for so many decades,
Not
right?
really.
There could be a push and shove and a give and a take kind of a thing. See, for instance, today in the Democrats in the US, you have people who are, partly conservative, and then you have the, firebrand AOCs, the Ocasio-Cortezes and whatever, who drive me mad as well. But, so you have them. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that they sort of live, they jostle, but they live under one tent. So it's not like a totally left-wing
I
party,
would-
the Democratic
I
Party.
would disagree there, that they don't live and coexist. I mean, American polity cannot be compared to Indian politics simply because it's bipartisan and we are not.
Correct.
You know?
So what I'm trying to say is now that we are trying to make this bipartisan, I'm trying to come now to the present. Now that we are effectively trying to make it bipartisan, where you are saying the BJP is on this side and the India Alliance is on this side, right? This is what effectively we are trying to, this is the message, I don't know, hopefully that we're trying to send across.
No, not really.
So are we still sending the message that the Hindutva is on one side and Arvind in Delhi, Mamta in West Bengal, and Rahul in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh and Shiv Sena in
I don't think that's up to us to, kind of
I think
either
it is
design
very-
or send the message.
No,
Us,
it's not about sending.
By us meaning I mean the political class.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that,
Yeah.
do you think therefore, by such a fragmented India alliance, which cannot see beyond their own noses and beyond their little pocket burrows, do you think that there can be a sort of a contest of ideologies in that sense of the word?
See,
Or it's just playing this little Hindu-Muslim caste, sub-caste game?
I think instead of getting lost in micro details, we need to rise up and take a perspective. The perspective is, are we looking at a bipartisan polity versus a federalist polity? And, I mean, that's very clear. The answer is that we cannot be bipartisan because, I mean, I don't think you will have the rise of the BJP in a dramatic manner or the rise of the right wing in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, and so on and so forth.
No, I don't think, Rakesh, this is
No, let me finish.
20 years back, we
Let
used
me
to say
finish.
there's not going to be no rise in the BJP anywhere. Today they are invincible.
Let me finish. So first aspect is this, okay? The second aspect is in terms of political space that is available. Now, globally if you look at it, historically if you look at it, the right can only be countered by a left of center formulation.
Correct.
But there is currently no left of center formulation of any kind. Aam Aadmi Party is busy proving itself to be a better BJP, a cleaner BJP, a humanist BJP, the Deen Dayal Upadhyay model of BJP, which would be, and I mean RSS would have no reason to be displeased with what AAP is today. The Congress is trying to be too many things at the same time. If the Congress were to be able to recast itself into a left of center formulation and junk, its Hindutva and its other considerations, then it might actually begin to emerge as a coherent force.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that is true, then what explains, Rakesh, that absolutely, I'll talk about Goa since I know of Goa politics a little more. Then what explains, if this is true, that Congress structures itself as a left of center formation?
Congress has to.
Left of center formation and whatever. And from there, the leadership will come up. We have absolutely left of center all their lives. Until today, they are perhaps left of center. 70% of the politicians of the ruling party today, 70% of them, 70 or 75%, Vicky will correct me with figures, are ex-congressmen, are inherently left of center. But they've all jumped the brigade and gone over to the other side. So what do you do with opportunists that exist within the Congress party? You mentioned them as being the largest force then. Now, they are the dominating force. You just have a couple of voices in the wilderness. I'll give you an example in Goa. Look, the BJP can, even in those days, even when it was not in power, they could put up a hardcore RSS pracharak like Manohar Parrikar up front, build him up, get him to become an MLA in Panjim, and then on he rose the ranks and became the chief minister of the state. Today, can one say, even if Goa mentally is a Congress state, Congress is inverted commas, but would want to vote left of center, which is the one Congress, the genuine congressman that can actually contest in any seat in Goa and win it comfortably? I'll give you an example.
Not defect to BJP.
Yes. So that is the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Is, for instance, there is someone like, let's say, Girish Chodankar. Whether what his merits are and demerits are as a person, I'm not interested. But he has stuck his guns and remained with the Congress for his entire political career. He would be one person who would not defect. But I can bet he would not get elected from any constituency in Goa. Why this dichotomy?
Well, we can't,
So are we unable, so the left of center formulation,
we
the
can't
point
lay the
is,
blame on the political class
no,
alone.
so that's what I'm saying. So is it that the left of center population, intelligentsia, social activists, whatever, are unable to build up character in these individuals and push them up the political ladder? Like what the RSS did for so many years, built up, whether you agree with their ideology or not is a different story. But they built up these people. You would never ever dream of having Manohar Parrikar cross over to the Congress. No? This would never happen. Shripad Naik would never ever cross over to the Congress. Modi would never ever cross to the Congress. At the moment, the only person you know who would not cross over to the BJP is Rahul Gandhi. You bets are off on anybody else in this country.
But, Oscar, I mean, a simple question I would ask is, can you define Congress ideology? Is there a definition?
There is.
No, there is not.
There is.
The Congress is not aware of it. The Congress is not projecting it.
I mean, even in
the Congress definition is not BJP.
In the defense of the indefensible Congress,
Yes.
of course it's a party of dynasts and it's a party of the Gandhis and all the rest of it. But it is something that represents us in many ways, right? It is something, I mean, even the AAP, you might call it a B team or the BJP or whatever. I've been with the AAP and I know that 80-90% of the people there in the AAP were people who were completely disillusioned with the Congress at that point of time. It was basically the whole AAP movement, the IAC movement was the absolute disgust and the disillusionment with the Congress. That's from where it sprung. That the BJP
Financed
then
and supported by
that's
RSS.
fine. That how the BJP drove political benefits out of it is another story. That is in hindsight. But at the time,
blueprint itself was drawn at the Vivekanand Foundation,
that's
headed by Ajit Doval.
No. But you
The
couldn't.
blueprint for IAC was drawn up by Govindacharya.
No, let me put myself in the line of fire. I joined AAP not because I was convinced that an Ajit Doval or Govindacharya was there behind the scenes, though we had heard of these rumors. I joined AAP simply because of the visceral disgust at what the Congress had done to this country. That is the reason I joined AAP. And I'm sure that 70% of the people who were with me would join AAP for that. And so therefore, if AAP was to turn, by this argument when you say that the AAP built by Doval, etc., then the AAP should have been joining hands with the BJP now. No? They've not been joining hands. They have been. You have Manish Sisodia in jail for a year. You have Sanjay Singh in jail for 2 years. Nobody stays in jail for 2 years if they're not actually opposing Modi. The moment you do a deal with the BJP, you are out and your slate is wiped clean.
Let's differentiate between
my argument
personality clashes between...
So my argument is only this. From a broader perspective, let's not get into the nitty-gritty. My argument is just this. What is it that one needs to do to build up this left of center liberal coalition of sorts as one unifying force? This is my point. I will, there is Mamta doing her work there, there is Stalin doing his work there, and whether you like them, don't like them is a secondary story. Yeah. But if you want this to be a contest, how do you become a unifying force? Because the BJP today is a behemoth. It's got all the money in the world, it's got all the muscle in the world, it's got the media on its side, it's got just everything on its side. And it looks heading for a smashing majority in 2024 without a doubt. And these guys are still doing their one-upmanship when they don't even know that they're staring down the barrel of a gun. So my argument is, how do you have very little time now, but how do you consolidate this as a force?
Okay.
As an idea?
The only point I would make is that you are placing too much import and responsibility on the political class. Let's talk about ourselves as voters. What do we do? How do we behave? What are the signals we send to the political parties? Let's look at Gujarat, a state I know well. In the last election, out of 182, 102 seats had 50% or more vote share for BJP. Now, even if the entire political class came together, they couldn't defeat BJP. Lok Sabha elections around the corner. Let's look at last election in UP. Of the 80 seats, in 50 seats or 52 seats, BJP had over 50% vote share. So even if you had everybody coming together, nothing would happen. Since you talked about Goa, before I talk about Goa, I've often wondered what is it that would take for voters to start saying enough is enough. We've had enough of BJP, enough of Hindutva, enough of Ram Mandir. Now we need to actually start looking at our own welfare. Okay. So what are those pain points? We all know the pain points. Okay, the unemployment is at a historic high. Unemployment among the youth is 45% and above.
It doesn't get reflected in an electoral context.
Exactly. So we know the pain points. We don't know the thresholds yet. Now, to relate it back to the Goa context, I wondered, when the Goa election results started coming out, that here's a urbanized state with high levels of education. We all read headlines during COVID about how there were oxygen shortages at GMC, how oxygen supply was being switched off at night, and because of that, people were dying. Now, in any kind of responsive and responsible democracy, you would expect the voters to punish the government responsible for it. Nothing happened. You start looking at various other kinds of examples. Demonetization. It's the most harebrained scheme of any time. Nobody else but Modi would have done such an idiotic kind of disastrous economic thing. Nobody punished him for it.
But why? Why? What is it? So these which you would say
I don't know. I think there are all these are pain points. All these pain points should start having political impact in some way or the other. What we are finding, to our shock and surprise, is that there doesn't seem to be a threshold. But I'm hopeful that there will come a point when people say, hang on, I cannot feed my child dal, milk, and other things. No, yes, government is giving me food grains, but I can't afford food.
Correct. So the BJP argument is that they are a very Labharti or whatever, very welfare-oriented government. So it's it's conservative in its political thought, but it's very leftist as far as its economic thought is concerned. So it just loves to give.
Apart from the food grains.
The food grain, whatever. Yeah. Food grains, cooking gas, and whatever.
I
I don't know how much is fact.
All those have been demolished in terms of whatever.
So exactly what my point is. So there are pain thresholds. There's no doubt. Whether inflicted.
There are pain points, but we don't know thresholds.
So there are pain points, whether self-inflicted or whatever, globalized, whatever it is. There are pain points. But this is my argument. So is it that despite the pain points, the population of this country is prepared to repose its faith in a Modi rather than an opposition which is completely disjointed and, as I said, just more interested in looking after its pocketbooks?
But I think
you should give an alternative. Right?
And that is the problem, that you do not have a coherent ideological alternative being presented in a manner that that people can feel confident about and repose their faith in. That is our major problem.